If you could imagine, taking the resources that you save from consolidating and using it to clean up a brownfield, and then to put a new business there, and to take the taxes that business generated, and then go clean up the next site, and prepare the next site, and use it to build upon. That's what these resources can be used for, if we can just get some leadership and inspired leadership behind them. And it's going to take leadership from the private and public sector. There have to be champions if we're going to improve the way we deliver government services. And it's always said that necessity is the mother of invention. And I hope that in this case, the necessity of doing so will be the father of cooperation to be able to get these things done. Because our future depends on it. And it shouldn't be just about if we fail to do it, what will happen. It has to be about the hope for the future that it brings if we do. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a few thoughts on these reforms and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We will return to the speaker in a minute or so for the traditional Q&A session of our forum here. And I'd like to remind everybody to be thinking of your questions and have them be brief, please. Question form, no speeches, but this should be a good opportunity. We welcome all of you here in the room and those who are listening to WCPN 90.3 FM, WCLV, WTAM, and all of the many radio stations across the country. Now, first question, please.
If you read the media, you will recognize the fact that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of organizations around the state that are trying to accomplish at least part of what you're talking about. What priority has ever been given to try to coordinate and consolidate those people so that the efforts can be channeled?
Well, I mentioned that we formed a commission on local government reform that's being actually chaired by Larry Flowers, who's a former state representative and a former fire chief who understands how government services are delivered at the local level, and they are meeting today. And the goal for that group is to identify shortcomings in state law that could prevent these consolidations from happening. It is to collect the best ideas of consolidations and reforms that have been undertaken. And it will also have the Ohio State University will be doing, the John Glenn Center there will be doing a study on the best practices that have been administered both in Ohio and in other states. And I think that's the easy part, though. I think that the ideas, I think there are plenty of good ideas out there. It really takes people wanting to champion it, and it's a hard thing to accomplish. I know that I'll use a Montgomery County example, and I will give the local governments, the county government there. They just built a new jail not too long ago, and the jail is almost already full. And there was no end to this process of continuing to build and build and build if they kept doing it the same way that they'd always done it. And so they came together and they got the sheriff and the county commissioners and the clerks of court and the judges together who saw a vested interest in the fact that none of them wanted to have to raise taxes, none of them wanted to have to go through severe sacrifices. And they figured out a way to reduce the time of processing, because understand in jail that's not supposed to be a long-term stay. That's supposed to be you're arrested, you're brought in, you have your court hearing, and then you move on to the different part of the process. They figured out a way to reduce the number of days that people had that they had to hold people by, I think, 2.5 days, and that reduced the daily jail population significantly, which saved enough money that they're actually going to be able to come in on budget. But the only way you could do it was getting them all together, because everybody in their own silo continuing to do things the way that they had does not help you achieve that. And I think it's sharing those experiences that I hope we will be able to do through the Local Government Reform Commission. But ultimately, I reiterate, it takes champions in local government that are willing to step up and say, this is important and I'm going to lead it.
Senator, if you'll permit a slight deviation, how do you feel about the privatization of state assets and your reasons for feeling that way?
Privatization of state assets. I think it's a growing trend that has occurred with toll roads, lotteries. I think there's conversations about college dorms and turning those over, at least to the operation of private operators. I think that it has its place. I don't think that you can make a blanket statement and say it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. I think in certain circumstances it has its value. But with the financial markets the way they are, the idea of selling some of these assets and bonding them and doing the way that they were being financed in the past, I think that those are less likely to happen going forward than they have been in the past.
Senator, county government in Ohio is a relic of the early 19th century. The form of it has basically not changed since then. And the principal obstacle to change is the power of the statewide organizations of county elected officials, the county commissioners organization, the sheriff's organization, the treasurers, and so on. Is the General Assembly, do you think, willing to take that on and start to make some real changes? And another thing this General Assembly could do is make a simple change in the law that would no longer allow all these elected officials to have a wide open patronage operation that they're allowed to do now. Are you willing to take that on?
Well, I think your analysis is on as it relates to the power of the collective voices of the organizations and those elected officials. I think that that was evidenced by the fact that I was probably on a bulletin board in every one of their offices with a line drawn through my face and you know, a doll hung around the neck. Here's the thing: is that I believe that there is an ability through the code as it's written to come up with reform of many of these things on their own. We always run into the problem in the state of the issue of local control versus state top-down sort of discussions about what you shall do. And you know, I think there's some legitimate issues that come up from time to time there where maybe we are doing a little too much, but every once in a while it's also true that people won't do anything themselves without leadership. And I think that the state government can be that catalyst in these circumstances. However, I do think that it's going to take, I think the state government will only act when there are enough people at the local level who demand it to act, because that's really how it happened. We're not going to change school funding, we're not going to change the way we treat higher education or our tax code or things like that until people just get fed up with the way things are and state government says, you know what, we better change this thing. And that's usually how it happens. I am willing to play my role in trying to get state government to change, but I will tell you that look, my phone rang off the hook. I mentioned that you would have thought I was allowing Cuyahoga County to secede from the state. And I say that because people wanted to stop the change in other counties from happening in Cuyahoga County because they thought they might be next. And I understand that. And I respect the fact that in some counties, you know, things are fine. But you know what? We should have the freedom in our code to give people in local counties the ability to change themselves so that they don't have to be an orphan of that 1900, that system that we established in the 1900s. And that it should be open for change, and the state law should allow for that to happen.